Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Optimistic Agenda podcast. My name is Mossum, I'm your host, and today's episode is a particularly vulnerable one for me. It's something that I recorded off the cuff a couple of weeks ago in the moment after processing all of the feels that I was dealing with, unsure of whether I was even going to share this on the podcast so publicly. But when I listened back to it, I realized that it might help someone. So here we go. And this was, one of those days where everything just kind of starts off fine and then just snowballs into chaos. This was one of them. It started off well enough, but literally nothing went to plan. And it was the most frustrating thing ever. And all the emotions sort of built up on each other as the day went on until they peaked before they came crashing. And I went into old patterns of blaming and shaming myself, retreating, all of those things. And you'll kind of hear what I went through as I'm describing it in the episode itself. But it was recognizing that I was doing this that initiated the shift for me, noticing the pattern, understanding where it was coming from, processing the emotions around it, and then choosing differently going forward. And now, I have to say, I did record this pretty late at night after a lot of heavy emotional processing. So if I sound a bit slow in the episode, or I'm rambling on, or you hear the occasional yawn in between words that I could not edit out, just roll with me on this one. And just a quick update, since recording this, I actually spoke to another vet about the whole teeth situation, and they mentioned that they really should have consulted or informed me first before removing them, or at the very least, taken some pictures or something and shown me how bad it was inside to justify the removal. But they also said that it was unlikely that the teeth could have gotten that bad to need removal. Like they need to be super awfully unhygienic over a long period of time, which is so frustrating to hear in hindsight. But at the same time, it's really hard to see what we were all being protected from in the long run. As the vet had mentioned that if they'd been left in, he might have developed a nasty infection, which could have been more serious. So it's kind of impossible to say what the quote-unquote right call would have been. But the good news is he's doing fine. And that is the most important thing, that he's healthy, he's okay, he's playing, he's completely A-okay. So, yeah. And we've just had time to kind of integrate it and, let it be and get used to it. So, yes. Without further ado, let's dive right into it. Enjoy! Well, hello. I don't know where to start because my brain isn't braining. And I thought this would be a wonderful thing to share for the podcast, but I'm also not sure if I'm going to put it on the podcast. So if you're listening to this, hello. There's just something I wanted to share, and I guess more from a space of, having just experienced it before, while it's still in the energy of that, and I'm integrating it rather than after having already slept on it and then feeling completely differently tomorrow. So I've had a heck of a freaking day, and it's been tough. There are things that have happened, and it's just, I was having a good day that went downhill pretty fast. So what happened was, I don't even know. I don't know how much I'm comfortable sharing, if I'm being very honest. But I took the dogs to the vet, and it was impromptu. But they just desperately needed for their teeth to be cleaned. And they had space today, so it was just a last minute thing. Took them, dropped them off. I'm always anxious when I'm dropping them off for these things because I don't like it. I don't like the effect of the tranquilizers that they give on them, when they're doing that. But yeah, that was that. Came home, did some work, went through a really frustrating cycle of like trying to sort something out, and it just wasn't working the way I wanted or expected it to. Like there was just too many things, hoops to jump through and everything here. So anyways, I did that. And then I had a session with with my coach, and we were just talking about like some things that were coming up for me. I don't even remember what it was now. And we sorted through that. There was some triggers, and she helped me through that. And then we finished that, went to collect the boys. And that is when everything like started going downhill, because they're very young. They're under 6 years old, both of them. Okay, 6.5. They're under 7, 6.5, and 5.5. And one of them had to have 2 of his teeth removed because they weren't like, I think it had just gotten really infected. And I was so sad. I was like, he is too young to be losing teeth. Like, he's too young to be losing his teeth. And I felt so bad. And I started going into a spiral. I did go into a spiral. And, I felt awful. I still feel awful, but I felt terrible. It's like, oh my God, what kind of a person am I? How did I not even know, how did it get to this point? And how could I not have known? Like, oh my God, he must have been in so much pain. I'm so bad. I'm such a excuse me. I'm such a horrible human. I couldn't even tell. I left it so long. Just all of these stories coming up, and one thing led to another. That's how spirals work. And I had to recognize that. And I came back. I was in the midst of self-soothing, not in a good way. And I sent my coach a message just with how I was feeling, and that I didn't know what to do, because I did recognize this is a pattern that keeps coming up time and time and time again. I just didn't know how to break past that. I knew, but I didn't. Do you know what I mean? I don't know what's irritating my throat right now, but it's one of those things where but you can't see your blind spots because you're so close to everything. We just can't do these things on our own. If it was someone else, I would be able to pick it up in an instant, be able to guide them and be done with it, in a short amount of time. But I couldn't see that for myself. And she got back to me and she told me to do, a few of the exercises that we've been doing together, some breathing, and just to be with it. And I was like, heck, you know what? Fine. Let me do that. And I sat. I must have spent 5, 7, maybe 10 minutes at most. I don't remember. It was definitely not. I did not feel like 10 minutes. Definitely felt less. And I sat. I did the breathing. I just sat with it. And then I went into my own practices. I started doing embodiment. I started moving with it. What was I feeling? Allowing it to come up. And I swear to you, oh my God, literally within 2 minutes or less of doing those, that embodiment practice, starting to move the energy and allowing it, I burst out into tears. And it was like having a proper ugly cry for a good hour or something, and just letting it all out, everything that I was feeling, everything that was buried underneath. I just allowed it to come out. And just being in that shit, I felt so awful. I felt horrible. There's so much guilt. Oh my God. It's still there, but the intensity is far, far less. if I were to rate it, I was on probably like a freaking 20 on 10. And right now, if I'm feeling it, I'm like on a maybe 3 on 10, if that. So yeah, it was very intense. Like the guilt I just felt awful if I haven't seen that enough. And it just came out. Oh my God, it kept coming out. And I was like allowing it, there's so many times we have this urge to resist it, which is what I was doing earlier as well. I was resisting, I was self-soothing by watching something, distracting myself and feeling sorry for myself, and telling myself, just being in the spiral, in the doom, and unconsciously like doing all of these things, as opposed to just sitting with it instead of trying to numb it away, just sitting with it and being with it and allowing it to come out. And what a gift. Like, it didn't feel good at the moment. Oh my God, it sucked. But just letting it out was so cathartic. Yeah, it was so cathartic. Like, I just let it out to the point where I just couldn't anymore. And then suddenly I was okay. I was done. Like, okay, now what do? We've processed this. And interestingly enough, it wasn't even like, yes, I felt bad. Like, I still feel bad. He should not have lost his teeth. But it happened. And we couldn't even, like, I kept looking and checking, and I couldn't have known. I should have known. But that's a lot of shoulding on myself. And it's a very awful, like, price to pay. I don't know how to, like, anyways, it happened. Maybe that, it was meant to happen, that way. Do I feel good about it? No. But it is what it is. And I recognize this, not only was this a pattern, but there's so many different layers at play. There was feeling the guilt, there was procrastination, there was self-abandonment, and just resistance to not doing the sitting with the feelings. And once I did that, I felt a little bit better, but more accepting of the situation of, like, now it has happened. And I guess part of me is also like, oh my God, I'm going to be judged. I don't even know if this is going to make it onto the podcast, very publicly available, to be very honest. But yeah, like, there is definitely a little bit of that fear of, oh my God, people are going to judge me. I'm so bad. How could I have let it go on for this long? Because he was clearly, like, I should have known, right? Like, I should have known. He's my little puppy. I should have known. I should have picked up on it. And I didn't. And I allowed it to continue. Like, how much pain would he have been in? Anyways, there is a little bit of that, but that is not the topic of conversation here right now. And I realized that there's all of these things that are at play, and their habits, there's things, their patterns that were instilled in us from a very young age, where we're constantly shown that if something happens, you make it your fault, right? Like, if you're a child and something happened and your parents made it, or your caregivers made it your fault, like, oh, look, this happened, you should have, and they're shoulding all over you as a little child. The thing that happens is we pick up on those things and we internalize them unknowingly, because we are little subconscious minds, little absorbent sponges when we are that young, tiny, little vulnerable creatures. And we learn to start doing that to ourselves. And not only maybe because it was done to us, but maybe because we also saw that same pattern being played out to those, like, by those adults in their own lives, to themselves, where maybe as soon as something happened, something went wrong, they they, started spiraling. That's all they started obsessively thinking about and worrying about and talking about, and being emotional about, because maybe they didn't have the tools, they didn't know any better. We pick up on that, and we are playing those patterns out unconsciously until we become aware of them, which is why I was like, a lot of people, all of my clients, anyone that I speak to, I say awareness is like 90% of the battle. Once you have awareness, to do something. You can make a conscious choice and start breaking the pattern. And sometimes there's more than one thing that's playing out. It's because it's all layered up. We're so complex as humans. Anyways, it wasn't. I started noticing that where it's like, oh my God, I've done this over and over and over again, and I didn't know what to do about it before because I hadn't seen it with as much clarity before. And sometimes it's just about having a soundboard, going to someone and just having them hold that space for you, to listen to you, to maybe give you like, hey, you know what, do this, or do it like this, or maybe you can think about it this other different way, and give you a little perspective. Oh, sorry, it's late, I'm exhausted. To give you a little bit of a perspective shift. And sometimes it just requires enough emotional energy. Like, I think, is it that the entropy in physics? I think, if I'm correctly remembering it, where there is, you need that startup energy. You need that like little spark to ignite the flame, to then set the fire. And sometimes it requires us being in a heightened emotional state. A lot of the times it requires us being in a heightened emotional state for us to recognize and to see those patterns. To see those patterns and recognize them, and then to do something about them, like using them as fuel to keep the flame lit, if that makes sense. So anyways, I feel like I'm rambling, but those are the things that I noticed was like, oh my gosh, the self-abandonment, the constant like blame and shame that I do with myself, like that needs to change. And just moving through it and getting it out and just literally unleashing it out outside of my body in some way was so helpful. And I stopped. I did, not that I stopped, but I stopped being in the spiral and being in the shit. Like, I moved, but at the same time I also did the things that I needed to do. Did it require a little bit of help and support? Yes, but I still got the things done, which is a first for me, because in the past I would have not done those things. And the other thing was also self-soothing. Like, our instinct is automatically to, when we're stressed, any kind of response, because we're trying to avoid our emotions, is to go and numb ourselves with something, right? Like, whatever your pick is, like, or your poison of choices, let's put it that way. For some people, it's binging. For some people, it would be throwing themselves into work. For other people, it would be like doom scrolling on your phone. Other people would be eating, like things just like, I know I mentioned binge eating, but what I mean is like just finding something to eat and crunch and munch on. And others might resort to drinking or smoking or like any of those things that are super unhelpful. Some might even go into working out, which is a good thing in a sense, because you're moving your body and sweating and everything. But I'm just talking about those things that are not helpful in this instance, because that's what I was doing, and had to recognize that in myself, and kind of just be like, address the emotions head on, and the desire and the instinct from which it was coming through, and recognizing like, just kind of questioning myself, like, yes, I really want to do this, but also like to self-soothe, I really, really want a chocolate. And I was like, am I going to feel good after I've done it? Am I going to feel like I want that now? Like, I'll feel so good with the dopamine hit and like, all of that like going on in the moment. But how am I going to feel 5 minutes after finishing? How am I going to feel tomorrow? How am I going to feel, like after I finished it? Even though I'm telling myself it's just going to be a little bit and it's just for today. Sometimes that's all it takes. It just takes today to break a promise to yourself, because I promised myself I'm going to not indulge in these things because I don't want to have the chocolate that doesn't make me feel so good, right? Maybe in the moment it's okay, but I definitely don't feel great after I've had it. And I don't need to explain why, but it just didn't feel good. So as much as I wanted that, it was kind of like, hang on, how am I going to feel after I finish it? A few minutes after, before I sleep, tomorrow in the morning when I wake up, tomorrow evening, once I'm thinking of doing this again under a different, guise or excuse or something for a different reason or a similar reason, and it didn't feel good. It didn't sit right. And it was also like, how does breaking a promise to myself feel? What is that setting for myself? Operating out of that higher self. Like, what is she going to think, say, do? How would she feel? Like, what is her guidance? And ultimately it came down to, I'm not going to feel good. It's not a healthy way of processing this. I've already processed the emotions. Like, I don't need to still keep going back and sitting in the shit once I've moved on. So that was another thing. And it was that vision. It's like, I don't want to, I don't feel good. I might feel good in the moment, but I don't, and that was it. That solved the problem. Literally. And I put it aside. I haven't had it. I came to record this, which I don't even know if I'm going to put it out. So, yeah. If I have put it out and you're listening to this right now, then thank you so much for sticking it out. I know I've probably not made a lot of sense in the last 20 minutes. But I just wanted to share that in case it's something you're going through, for like whatever it is. Just know that, number one, you're not alone. And there's healthy ways and coping mechanisms to be processing and dealing with these things. And sometimes it's as simple as just sitting with it for 5 or 10 minutes, moving your body, allowing your feelings to, like, the emotions within to lead you, and not creating that resistance, and recognizing where the pattern is and doing something to break that. Because if you're listening to this, you're a cycle breaker. You are a cycle breaker, and that means sometimes the shit is hard. It's so much. It's challenging, it's difficult, and we need people around us to sometimes lift us up, to remind us what a freaking phenomenal job we are doing. We need that validation from other people from time to time. Just cheerleaders, just people who are just like, you can do this. Like, I'm here rooting for you. And if you need a little loving support, a little cheer, I'll be here for you. So I hope that is what this episode has done for you. Please let me know how you found it. Slide into my DMs. On Instagram, I'm at The Optimistic Agenda. And I'd love it if you could leave a review and let me know what you thought, because that helps more people get this. It's just sharing this goodness, because our world could use more of that. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you have a beautiful day. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Optimistic Agenda podcast. If you loved what you heard, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. I would love for us to stay connected, and I'm always excited to hear your thoughts. Find me on Instagram at The Optimistic Agenda, where I also share more inspiration and behind the scenes moments. If today's conversation resonated with you, please do me a favour. Share it with your friends. Your support helps us spread the message and the good juju to more listeners. And if you could take a moment to leave a quick 5-star review, that would mean the world to me. It's like a virtual high five. Remember, you are so much more powerful than you were made to believe. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye.